Yeah.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
You look fabulous.
Oh, so do you. So do you. You're outdoors. I love it.
I'm actually not. I'm in a makeshift office here. I was like, this is a great background. I'm going to use it.
It actually looks like you're outdoors somewhere warm.
I wish. Instead, I'm in Florida with the humidity. So, having fun with that.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. We are so excited to talk to you today and to learn about, your career and your success and what you're up to now, specifically with your team being in the playoffs.
Yeah, we are one win shy of the Stanley Cup Finals, and that game is tonight at 8 o'clock. So we're knocking on wood and saying if we're so fortunate is kind of been the language used in the office in the last couple of days.
I know. Well, look, I know that it's a playoff day for you, and I know even though you're working virtually, I know what game days are like. So we really appreciate you taking your time today to speak with us. So let's kick it off.
Absolutely.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm from Florida. Never thought I'd be back in Florida, and here I am in Florida. I bleed the Maize and Blue. So for all of those Michigan Wolverines out there, went to school there. From there, went to Chicago. I'm such a big city girl. Chicago, New York, LA. Just really fell in love with the culture, the fashion, the sports. Just found myself really being curious. I think that's really kind of what led me to each of those cities and the world of advertising and the world of sports and kind of combining that love.
Yeah, that's great. And when you started your journey and falling in love with advertising, was it a conscious decision to start off on the agency side?
It's interesting. So my undergrad degree is in sports management communications and my master's degree is in advertising. There was something about my love for television commercials. And so the advertising agency side was just what I was interested in. And I know that from a sports perspective, most people are looking at, when I go back to Michigan and I ask people, who wants to work for a team or a league, like everybody raises their hand. And for me, the interesting thing was that, my start on the agency side came where opportunity, preparation, and luck came together. It truly was about networking. I happened to be on a boat cruise in Chicago and found out that Jim Kenyon from Relay Sports and Entertainment was on the boat and introduced myself and talked about what they were doing and the different projects they were working on. And interestingly enough, he invited me to come in for what I thought was an informational interview, working on the NASCAR for the U.S. Army. And it ended up working on the U.S. Army All-American Bowl, which was the nation's premier high school football all-star game. And so it was an interview. And lo and behold, I got it. So again, that's all about, opportunity, preparation, and luck.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And how long, your first agency job, what was your role?
So my first job was actually working for Relay and then Momentum on the Army business. And that was more on the sponsorship side, looking at from an experiential perspective. But the really interesting thing was that they moved me when I was at Momentum from Chicago to New York. And I sat there at McCann Erickson because of the fact that I was involved in all of the other different pieces of business. So from the creative side, the analytics, the media, I really got immersed in all the different facets of advertising. And that really kind of taught me just how big and broad campaigns could be when you think about how they start from the brand level. And that got me really excited. And when I left Momentum on the Army business, I went to Ogilvy and was truly working kind of on the agency side from the creative side of the house. And this is where, we won the NASCAR business and led one of their largest brand campaign efforts. So again, it came with the strategy and being on the front lines from an experiential and sponsorship side allowed you to understand the brand in a different way. And then, I think everybody I want to do strategy. Nobody knows what strategy is until like a little bit later in your career. But, getting and working on the agency side really allowed me to see kind of how campaigns came together. And that was just what I fell in love with.
Yeah. And so from the campaign perspective, what think tells a good story? What makes a good story?
It's a really good question. I think one is understanding who you are. Like one of the things that I love the most about the Army business was that I got to know the soldiers, and I understood who they were. I understood the sports that I was representing, in order to say, how do I tell this story in a way that makes it impactful for those who are listening? Right? Because at the time you would have to actually enlist in the Army if you were going to, join the Army back in those days. I'm telling my age here. But from an Army perspective, it was telling those soldier stories through the epitome of strength. If I fast forward to one of the last campaigns I worked on in advertising was a campaign for the Olympics with Sport Check. And, that was all about kind of the adversity making you better, and kind of that insight in the fact that we've all failed. And from that failure comes strength. And so we were able to look at these Canadian athletes who, quite frankly, they're not summer athletes, from an Olympics perspective, they're much more known for winter sports. But taking some of I didn't make the Olympics in 2012. And so the next thing I did was I got rid of my coach, or I got rid of my partner, or I changed, my strategy there. We were able to take the negatives and flip them. And so at the heart of good storytelling is an insight, is something that kind of you're able to grab onto and build, that makes people feel relatable and a connection to.
Yeah, that's great. I always love how brands, use not only insights, but, the connectivity to the consumer in regards to really telling a story that's going to evoke action after they've, touched the heartstrings, if you will,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the current campaigns that we're doing here, and I know, I haven't really talked a little bit about what I'm doing with the Vinik Sports Group and the Tampa Bay Lightning is, one of the insights we took here is, everybody's social distance. And one of the natural elements to hockey is the glass. That is the protective, quote unquote, barrier between the fans and the players. And what we did is we actually took that glass and used it as a bridge where we had fans come and sign the glass. Social distancing, of course. And we actually had that glass travel with the team to Toronto and had it up in the field, rink of play, if you will, during the playoffs before the team left Toronto to go to Edmonton. And so, again, that goes into what are those insights in that story. And so we went from be the Thunder to be the distant Thunder, and kind of provided fans with a way to stay connected to the team.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great. So, you know what? That's a good segue. Tell us about you're new in your role, fairly new.
Yes.
So tell us, how did you end up back in Florida in this role?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. When I was in New York for 10 years, and I love New York, and I know you're in New York. I just needed a change. And so I went to LA, and I worked in the world of competitive esports, so video gaming for those who may not know what that is. And loved LA, loved everything about LA. But it was interesting that this role kind of found me while I was actually at a conference here at USF. And their VP of New Ventures started talking to me, and he's like, I'd love to talk to you about this role. And I didn't really have the desire to work for a team. I was really enjoying LA and kind of being in a new space from a digital and technology perspective. But the reputation of the organization and the desire to do something new in the world of sport and content. So underneath my remit is marketing, digital, social, game day presentation, PR, communications, broadcasting, media, and content. And so how do I, tie it all together and begin to tell stories of who and what the Lightning are? And if you think about, here we are on IG Live. This is content, right?
Yeah.
And so how are we connecting with fans who are younger, technologically savvy? And so to walk into, a new job and move across the country in the midst of a pandemic was one thing. So I've definitely gotten to know people via boxes. on Zoom. I don't recommend that. But it's forced you to really get to know people, really listen in different ways. It wasn't about coming in here and making change quickly. It was really about listening. And I think it was hard to do that when you're kind of in a situation where you don't know when the season's coming back. Now the season's here. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we're one win away from the Stanley Cup Finals, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
But it's a great organization, and I look forward to us kind of, I guess, the world moving in a more positive direction. So I can continue to build those relationships and do more for the team.
Yeah, and look, we know what hockey fans are so avid about their teams, and I recall a few years ago when I got my entry into hockey. The NHL said, you have to go to Tampa. You have to see what the Lightning have built. And I was there for one of the playoff games, and I was in awe of not only the fans, but the show that the team put together, and how the team was able to just, garner all this attention in Florida. I mean, it is hot there, right? And it's like, intuitively, it's like hockey cold, right? I mean, so what have you learned just in terms of the passion points with the team in Florida? Like, what's that connectivity that, really just that Tampa's rallying around the team?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about that is the ownership group here is so committed to the community. And I think because of that, they've rallied behind him. Jeffrey Vinik is his name. It's one of the reasons why I also came here. It wasn't just the Lightning, but all the things he's doing under the Vinik Sports Group. He's rebuilding kind of downtown in Tampa and kind of giving it a new identity, if you will. But it's interesting because I think what people find here is it's the experience when you go to the game. It's the community involvement that the team has, as I mentioned previously. If you look at all three teams here, they all do really well. I mean, we're in a football and baseball state. It's Florida. But from a brand perception perspective, like we lead in that regard. And so we've got really committed fans, and they've done a great job building that base. And I look forward to continuing to do that. And, as I mentioned, being in this role, it's not only the Lightning, but I have a digital OTT property that's called The Identity. That's, again, here about, how are it's a kind of a news, entertainment, lifestyle, digital network. That's all things Tampa Bay. We've got the Water Street Project, which is, again, kind of revitalizing downtown Tampa Bay. So there's a lot happening in the city. Fingers crossed we get that Super Bowl that happened in February.
I know. Well, it's interesting. I read a couple weeks ago that the NBA canceled their hotel rooms for All-Star 2021. So I was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen with the Super Bowl? But I actually someone who was a guest last week, who works for Wasserman, we asked her about the Super Bowl, and she's like, no, we're planning like it's happening. We're going to have multiple contingency plans, A, B, and C, but you know what? We're planning like it's going to happen. So keeping our fingers crossed that it will happen.
Yes, we are too, from the work we want to do here, and also the economic impact, I think, to Tampa. I mean, the Super Bowl is obviously a massive event for any city. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. So looking ahead, we're hoping that you guys win tonight.
Yes. Against the New York Islanders. So.
That's okay. Listen, it's all good. When you think about if your team is lucky enough to make it to the finals, what stories will you tell? How will you, go over? How will you just bring that excitement into the home of the fans who can't be there live?
So we've been playing around with some new digital technologies that we want to execute for round 4, should we be so fortunate, as they say in the office. So we're looking in those. We've also are going to open up potentially the arena for some private events for our staff. Just trying to get people excited, maybe some season ticket members. We do have some venues around the arena open. socially distanced, of course. So
Yeah.
we're trying to find ways to bridge the gap of not being there. Continuing to push community messaging with swag items, very grassroots that the team is executing, but really just trying. I'm focusing more with the team on all the digital technologies and what are those ways that we can. Not only, I guess we're experimenting for this season, but what could it look like for next season, depending upon where we sit from a fans and stands perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's great. And I think that during this time, and unfortunately, while fans can't be in the arenas, I think it's a really good time for folks like yourself to really test things that will enhance the experience, right, as you look ahead to 2021. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, you've had an amazing career. I mean, I know we've known each other for a few years, and I just remember when we met, I was just like impressed with your background and just loved your passion just in terms of everything that you were doing from a marketing perspective and also from a storytelling perspective. But what would be the three things, the three career insights that you would share with our audience today that, doesn't matter whether you're C-level, mid-level, or just starting out in the industry? What would those things be?
I think my first is know your North Star. And I say that because it doesn't mean you'll be that North Star, but it'll help you get to where you want to be. Like your skills are transferable. Like when I was younger, I wanted to be the CMO of the NFL. There's only one of them, and there might be 5 across all of the different leagues. And so even working in the world of advertising, I knew that I had to understand client relationships. I had to understand strategy. I had to understand sponsorship and production and data and analytics. And so all of those skills are transferable. So it's really about, if you know what that North Star is, you don't have to, if somebody says to you, what do you want to do? I mean, I still don't like that question. I never thought I'd be in esports. And so if you have that North Star, you're able to tell that story in a way that you can still be honest, but you can showcase how skills are transferable depending upon what are the roles that you're looking for. Yeah. So I'd say that would be the first one. The second would be, a few years ago, I had a male mentor of mine ask me if I'd ever had a female mentor. And I had to think back, and I hadn't. And he, he poked and prodded me about the why. And I didn't really have an answer. And I think it was because I didn't feel like I had anybody to really reach out to, or I hadn't seen somebody that I wanted to be like or emulate. And so with that, I began my search for female mentors, looking for someone in my mind who looked like me, who was that female executive that I aspired to be. And now that I've gone out and I have female mentors, I can't tell you how much I wish I'd done it earlier. But how much insight, I really glean from that, in the sense of someone who's walked in your shoes, someone who knows what it's like when you are the only woman in a room, who knows how to help you negotiate those salary points when you might feel, well, have I pushed enough? And they keep telling you to push more. So it's just been really fabulous to have kind of that female mentor. And the third strategic insight I would say is get yourself a crew. Like I have such an amazing group of people around me that support me, that build me up, that celebrate me, that console me, that I can bounce ideas off of. I mean, you were there when I called you a couple of weeks ago. And I think when you have a crew, it just makes life easier.
Yeah, I know for sure. And I know that one member of both of our crews is on, Courtney, who has, has been commenting here, but I think that that's really, really important because they're in this, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, I just think that being surrounded with people who you can be honest and authentic with, who aren't going to judge you, right? And also people who have been through it before, I think that's really, really helpful. So
100%.
Bonus question today is, what's your superpower?
Oh, my superpower. I had to think about this. my superpower. I would say being resilient. I think that's something from my personal life as well as my professional life is just, picking up, moving on, pivoting, just being able to learn and grow and be curious, and resilience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I didn't ask you earlier, but I'm going to ask you now.
Okay.
So are you a hockey fan?
I am now.
Okay.
I think I've always loved the game live. I think my first, I grew up in Florida, so there wasn't really, a lot of ice anywhere. But I will say that having gone to Michigan and seen, the Michigan State hockey games was just fabulous. And like living in the Detroit area where the Red Wings are, the Blackhawks in Chicago, the Rangers, in New York, you're around kind of the original six. So the game live is unreal. I would say that I've watched more hockey in the last month than I have my entire life. But I'm getting the lingo down. So
no, that's great. I echo the sentiment in regards to it is an amazing sport to watch live. And I remember the first playoff game that we had at Barclays Center. It was electric. It was on fire. So definitely a great game to watch live. So with that, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Good luck tonight. We'll be rooting for you.
Thank you. Yeah, go Bolts. Thanks.
Thanks. And thank you everyone for watching. And we'll see everyone here on Thursday for our next lunchtime conversation. Thanks so much.
Bye.